Hello to all. Here today in the Tier 8 Tech Tree British Destroyer Lightning. We're on the map Estuary and the mode is Domination. We're in 6 to 8 matchmaking, so we are top tier. No carrier this match, thankfully. So we'll be able to play a bit more relaxed. Anyhow, starting off, the Lightning, the Tier 8 Tech Tree British Destroyer. Pretty classic British Destroyer design. This is one of the unbuilt examples, I'm fairly certain. You can see her using the 4.1-inch dual-purpose guns with her 360-degree turrets, which rotate over the front of the deck. A trait she shares with the Jervis, but unlike the Jervis, you can see her electrically powered turrets are quite a bit faster. Anyhow, the Lightning is a Tier 8 destroyer, and it plays as a scouting destroyer, more or less. Has a standard British consumables, so that's standard damage control, British short duration but short cooldown smoke, and then British self-defense hydro. She has standard 4.1-inch HE at 1700 alpha, 4.5 second reload, and 2200 AP, so none of that high rate of fire lightning or Utland guns yet. In exchange, however, she does function very well as a scouting destroyer. As you can see, with a full concealment build, you get down to 5.5 kilometers of concealment, which is quite excellent, beaten at the tier. Oh, sorry. Bit of a ping spike. Hopefully I survive. Come on, World of Warships. Beaten. There we go. Beaten at the tier only by the likes of the Kagero and Asashio, of which there are none in this match. There's in fact a Loyang and a Sims. I see the Sims. So there's a Loyang with 5.8 detection in this cap. He does have that German 5.5 hydro, however, so I do have to play with care. Don't have RPF yet on this captain. However, I do vastly outgun him. He smokes up as I engage him, so I'm gonna quickly dodge away with my quick British rudder shift, dodging out on the Trento sap. I'm not gonna bother smoking. Just gonna let my gun bloom fade. I'm sure the Loyang popped his hydro, so I'm gonna force him to come to me if he wants. I know where his smokescreen is. At this point, I want to avoid taking any more extraneous damage. You can see my hit point pool, while not unimpressive at 1800, is nothing to write home about. There's no radars in this match, but there is a Flint, and he has quite a few allies. I've not bothered to launch any torpedoes in his direction because he's probably running his hydro if he has any sense. But I am going to pop my own hydro just to keep myself safe from his potentially. He leaves his smoke. I'm going to trade back some damage. Disengage myself with the smoke, but I have forced him from the area of the smoke screen. He's running his hydro, as you saw me briefly get hydroed there. But even though he's a formidable cap contester, if he wants to leave the cap like so, he has left the cap since the cap is now ticking. It's perfectly fine with me. I do have the detection advantage, as I did mention. These guys are spamming my smoke, very annoying. Is Trento going to try and reverse? Would be interesting, certainly. He's smoking up, so I expect him to turn either out and away or at full speed. Looks like just at full speed. So I'm going to launch my torpedoes. These are of course British torps, so I do have the option to single fire, although I'm going to spread fire here, just for area saturation. Loyang does launch his Loyang torpedoes. Picked up on my self-defense torpedo. Also picks up the Toronto torpedo. Loyang slides back into the cap, but as I was mentioning, these are British single fires. They have an 8-kilometer range. Alpha of about 1500. He's at the edge of the smoke screen. Surprised you can pick me up. Oh, he's behind that rock. That's where he is. Gonna just slide outside of the range, dodge those shells with my improved propulsion. Come back into the cap. I do want to interrupt the cap again, but do note that I am gonna have to make careful use of my smoke in order to do so. I know exactly where he is with pinpoint precision, and this time he doesn't have smokescreen at all, so now I have the advantage. if I can get my eyes onto him. His hydro finally does time out, so now he is exceptionally vulnerable. He is exactly behind this rock position. Most of his allies outside of the Pensacola have left, so now at this point I'm not afraid to push up into him. I'm going to switch over the single fires, 8 kilometers as I mentioned. He's forced from the cap. I'm going to empty one of the quadruple tubes. Alabama behind me as well, so these are the 3 ships that can fire at me potentially. He's running from me toward the cap edge. It's the only location he could realistically be. That or he's ventured north. And I do find him. Now one might argue that I might want to pick up the cap first, but I do want to hunt him down while I can still ascertain his location. He's using an American smoke, which means it has American smoke cooldown. His smoke just dropped off in terms of having finished, making use of my 100 or 360 degree turrets here in order to switch directions very easily without having to adjust any of my firepower. His rearward firepower, as you can see, is not the most impressive. We take the cap, we're gonna hunt this fucker down. Our firepower is not immodest, but not the most impressive. We do have an Edinburgh with us, however. To be careful not to under-angle enough so as to take a gun offline. Alabama giving me firing bloom. Probably should have smoked a little earlier, honestly. Taking a little bit of extraneous damage. I am going to push all the way in and hunt him down though, I think. Give him a nice custom spread. My Hydra's about to pop up, so best to be safe. Dispatch him quite easily. Now we finally secured the cap. That has been the efforts of most of our match, but that's perfectly fine by me. $2,000 HP left to spare. I do have a big HP advantage on him, so he did trade fairly well with me overall, using his allies and such over the course of the match, but as you can see with my superior 5.5 detection, even though he has that powerful hydro for cap bullying, eventually, without help, I do force him from the cap. And switch back to cluster torps. But anyhow, torpedoes are a very moderate range. Haven't gotten my range module upgrade yet, I believe. Actually, no, 12.2 looks reasonable. So this is the maximum gun range, but as you saw there, the Lightning is a reasonable gunboat, but not a superior one in the way that the Akazuki or the Le Fantasque at this tier, for example, might be. Now we've run to the border, so it's going to take us a little while to get back into the fight. Like all British destroyers, well, her base speed at 35 knots or so is not too bad. She lacks the speed boost consumable. That's what she trades for her improved British propulsion plant. So she's very good at starting and stopping to and fro, but in terms of crossing actual map distance, she is somewhat inferior to some of her counterparts at other tiers. Or sorry, counterparts in the other nationalities. She does handle very well, has a very short rudder shift time, which allows you to maneuver, and this combined with those 360 turrets means you have very, very good aggressive response time. As long as you're moving toward the enemy, you'll be able to respond quite easily. Torpedo angles, on the other hand, are good, but not great. You do have to expose a fair bit of broadside, not as horrific as some of the other boats of this tier, such as the Akazuki's very narrow spread, which I believe starts about here and ends about here in terms of cone. But still, the two centerline tubes are not the most aggressively placed compared to, say, relatively low in task. Cyclone kicks in, so it's going to obscure our vision. Pretty low damage game overall so far. That's quite alright. Flint gets dispatched by my Grisia in the smoke, or in the distance. That was, of course, due to his hydroacoustic search. There's a Fuso, Pensacola, Eugen, King George, Vladivostok, and Sims left. So Sims I still outspot. 6-6 versus my 5-5 means I beat him by a full 1.1 kilometers. Fuso was probably running. I imagine he might have rendezvoused with his teammates who are probably somewhere around here or somewhere around here. The fact that my northern battleship team is slowly pushing them in would make me guess that they're probably going to be around here. We spot the Fuso at very, very close range, cyclone range in fact. He spots the Toronto. I'm looking at that Pensacola, thinking about if I want to try firing. I think the answer is yes. He's low enough where I can fire and then smoke immediately. Now I myself am low as well, so I have to dodge this as best as I can. Also giving away my position to the Fuso, but it's more important I take the cap. You can see the railroad angles are vastly inferior. He's turning away now, so these torps are not great to launch, but I'm going to do it anyway, and also just consider open water gunboating. I kind of regret launching those torps now, as you see, as the KGP does pop up. Fuso dispatches the Edinburgh, but does catch my first torpedo set, so at least there's that. My smoke is fading. KGB appears to be slowing down as he came across the corner. We see most of the rest of their team. I'm gonna fire a little bit before he crests the corner. Ceasefire now. He's about to crest. I'm just outside of range due to the cyclone. A modest 36,000 thus far, but we did spend most of our health on that Loyang trade. So now, as a result, you can see I'm playing rather more cautiously. During the Loyang trade as well, you could argue I probably should have smoked much more immediately. Held on for too long, and as a result I took a lot of extraneous damage. Scharnhorst does manage to win the trade with the KGB thanks to his powerful close-in alpha weapon of torpedoes. His triple tube cleaning up the fight, which otherwise it looks like he would have lost quite badly. He is however going to burn to death, but we have quite firm cap control at this point, so even with that trade kill. Now we're going to secure a cap more than likely. The Sims get spotted. Gonna hunt down what's left of their team. Prince Eugen gets dispatched by my NCAL. So we're in a firm position. Sims is open water gunboating on Massachusetts from the looks of it, so I don't know how I feel about that. Massachusetts secondaries are no joke. Especially when they're top tier like this, that ship is frankly quite overpowered. But 2 assisted captures. Sims hugging that island, that fighter telling me that the Vladivostok is basically where we last spotted him. I'm gonna just gun toward him, hopefully after the Sims dies. He's YOLO torping right now, dispatched by the Massachusetts secondaries. Massachusetts both has an enormous torpedo belt and Sims torpedoes hit like wet noodles, so not expecting him to die here. He takes 3 and easily survives. There's Vladivostok now. So hard to say what he's going to do. Now, British single fires you don't want to launch singly unless you know very precisely where he's going to go. I'm guessing I'll have to launch soon. I have a Gorizia in my way. It's like I predicted wrong. Don't want to continue launching anymore because there is a Gorizia. I don't want to cut off his options. Looks like he's going to die though, so now I will launch. Gorizia apparently doesn't understand what smoke firing penalty means. You can see the Vladivostok's probably going to dodge most of my torpedoes because I single fired. That is the price of single firing. Need him to turn back out, in fact. Oh, he does catch one of my torpedoes, in fact. Probably should have made a wider custom spread than that. The smoke's going to fade shortly, but he's fighting someone else, the Sinop, so not too concerned about him. You can see he shatters most of my 4-inch shell armor, or most of my 4-inch shells on his armor. Gonna have to try and aim for the superstructure. Thankfully, the Massachusetts does clean him up, but there you can see the weakness of single firing, especially against a target which is kind of in close proximity, able to weave. They do allow you to do some nice, precise attacks, but even a small course adjustment by the enemy will throw off your aim. And so as a result, I missed the majority of those torpedoes. Anyhow, nevertheless, 52,000 damage with 102 shells. Exclusively armor piercing, you can see a lot of shatters. Any battleships I shot at tended to shatter my shells. 3 torpedo strikes, 3 incaps, 3 ships destroyed, 3 fires, 3 floods, 2 defender ribbons, 2 assisted captures, and 6 spotting ribbons. Team score wise, we come out with a modest 1700 at the top of the team, but we are top tier, of course. And detailed report wise, you can see we have essentially all of the Lo Yang's health. Apparently none of my teammates were interested in shooting at him, which is very disappointing to me. Please shoot at destroyers, people, and then some battleship health here and there in that Pensacola that we did clean up. Distribution-wise, more torpedoes than gunfire here, but it really does depend on how your game goes and if you have the chance to set fires. Module-wise, I think I'm fully upgraded, but I'm not certain. Yes, I am running a fully upgraded Lightning, but anyhow, we'll go back into a match and get a second one up before we continue onward, and then we'll go back and check out the build from there. But generally speaking, with regards to the characteristics of the Lightning, she is a fairly well-balanced destroyer package. In terms of Tier 8, she has very competitive concealment, very reasonable gunpowder. Torpedoes are a bit on the short range side. Tier 8 is where you start seeing the likes of 9.2 kilometer range on Benson and Xinyang, as well as the 10 kilometers on the Kagero, or even the 20 kilometers on the Isashio, although those are fairly limited, obviously. And I believe the Ognivoy upgrades into 10 kilometers as well, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a fairly competitive tier for torpedo range. So at 8 kilometers, you're probably around average, maybe slightly below average. But in exchange, you get that very almost IGN concealment, which allows you to beat out a lot of the top tier ships at this tier. Now, there's also Z23, for example, for 9.5s, but she has 6.2 detection compared to your 5.5. So she's very competitive as a scout. And her package of the 2 quad torpedoes and 6 guns, which fire reasonably and do reasonable damage, give her a generally overall balanced package. Anyhow, into this match, we're in pure tier 8 matchmaking, so 8s only. There is a carrier who's coming to check me out, but I am British. So if he does do a flyby immediately over me, I am just going to smoke. My allied carrier does drop me a fighter, however, so if he wants to keep hovering in here, it's going to cause him some problems. He does find me eventually, so it's going to prompt me to turn on my A temporarily. Looks like he's just gliding right past me, so I'm going to keep it on. And he hit some Massachusetts and Vladivostok flak because his squadron disintegrated instantly. In the meantime, someone did shoot at me, it looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shells. Not sure who those could be. Could be the front guns of a Cleveland or Baltimore. Or potentially even a full salvo from the Lightning. The shells were fairly slow, but all three of the 2 Americans and the Lightning do have fairly slow shells. This guy was kind enough to give me a fighter, so give him some manners. Now remember, I have good forward angles and kind of inferior rearward angles, but based on the proximity of that Cleveland to me, who may have been the one who shot at me, I suspect I might be forced from the cap with the radars. So as a result, I'm gonna sacrifice my gun angles in order to get a slightly safer reverse in cap. Turns out it's a Z23 in this cap. Now he has a 5 kilometer hydro, but he has inferior detection to my Kagero, for example, which is going to result in him getting lit up. So on my side I have Vladivostok, Baltimore, Alabama. It's not too much in the ways of allied or enemy firepower, so I am going to take this time to open up. Firing from concealment still right now because the Z did decide to smoke. One thing I did forget to mention is that the Lightning, like all British destroyers, does share her British comrades fairly good 8% fire chance, which makes her actually a fairly good fire starter. My Kagero unfortunately does catch some torpedoes from the Z, thanks to some reckless maneuvering. I did smoke up because the planes were flying over, and as you can see, someone did try to shoot at me. Sectoring again to try and deal with some planes. My AA, however, is not particularly impressive. You can see, however, moving up from the Jervis, I at least do have some long-range AA. Cleveland's getting fairly close, but I think I'm going to be able to radar. As the end of my smoke and the end of the cap comes, I'm going to just take the cap and leave. We're not going to be able to hold it. The Z-23 is going to come back. I have Cleveland in a very, very aggressive position trying to radar something, but there's nothing there anymore, so I'm not sure what he's up to. My Atago in the meantime is trying to secure A on his own. I'm going to wander inside of the Cleveland's radar range. Still slightly outside of the Baltimore, but if he does randomly decide to pop radar, I am going to be vulnerable. Z-23 does wander into the radar range at the very end, but as you can see, he's quite zoned out. Gonna pop both tubes over there, even though I'm closing in on the Alabama. And the reason I'm popping both tubes is I want to zone... Oh, I left my A on. I want to zone the Z-23 off of getting into the cap in the next recent time. Hopefully these are not Havars, because if these are Havars, as so, you can see the Havars. I was perfectly broadside, he breaks all my modules, and perfectly broadside versus Havars is not something you want to do. Probably should have checked that in the match screen. During the loading screen, I believe if you check the aircraft rating of the Lexington, the Tiny Tims give it a slightly higher aircraft rating, and the Havars give it a slightly lower rating. You can see me using my 8% fire chance to get a fire. He damn cons the one fire, but I can only fire for another 10 seconds, so it's going to be hard for me personally to follow up on that fire. You see me not using my hydroacoustic, which I probably should have done, but just barely ranging out the Z-23. Now again, remember there's not too much here in the ways that can contest me, so I'm going to fire upon the Alabama. He did not end up ever securing the cap. Baltimore might fire at me a couple times, but I do want my follow-up fire, having worked to get one. And we get that fire, so now I'm going to stop firing and try to go dark. I mean, he knows where I am, so at this point I'll keep my AA on. Might as well try for a second fire if I'm going to get lit up. Z-23 is taking my cap. Lexington's trying to charge me with torps or something, from the looks of it, but he's way off. I'm going to short these. Oh, he's stock. I can tell he's stock because he's firing twin torpedoes rather than triples. He also seems to be a bit of a rookie, since this is probably his second mistake. My allies are taking this cap. But I do want to get in on this cap experience, so I'm going to go in with them in case I get interrupted by that Alabama. My single fire continues to tick. This time I'm going to turn off my AA. Don't want to forget again. As with all British destroyers, she has floaty arcs at long range. You can see me arcing fairly easily over that substantial mountain. Use that 360-degree rotation. Probably the last salvo I can fire here. I want to stay in concealment, and I'm going to fight for that B cap once more. Looks like my allied Atago is going to score some torpedo hits. The Alabama has a fairly substantial torpedo bulge, but Atago torpedoes do hit hard. We're in a fairly tricky position. We're up ships, but we're down on caps. I know that Cleveland is still there, so I do need to be very aware of what can fire at me. I basically have to pretend that I'm liable to get spotted at any point. Looks like the smoke is forming over there. Do they have... They don't have any... So I know they don't have any British cruisers, so this has to be a Z-23. I did see him briefly fire from the center of mass. I'm gonna pop my own hydro at this point. Now while it's tempting to hit the Vladivostok, he probably feels unthreatened. I haven't been spotted for a while. I was last inside of A. So I'm gonna actually dump a tube into his smoke first. Hopefully he's not running his hydro. Nothing in the area would have prompted him to pop it, so should be fairly safe to keeping my distance here from the Vladivostok, because again, I don't want to potentially be raided by the Cleveland, though the Cleveland has moved off apparently. I do outgun the Z-23 in a straight up fight. He has those anti-cruiser-ish 150s, remember, more than likely, so the heavy caliber, high fire chance, but low overall DPM rifles. Gonna score, looks like 2 hits on the Vladivostok here, which is enough to finish him off with the help of my allies. My set meant for the Z-23, however, does comb the smoke, as they say, without finding any hits. So I do have to be careful. Lightning in the distance does get lit up. He's at about half, so I have a fairly substantial hit point advantage. HE firing through. Gonna get a brief glimpse of the lightning. Gonna try and put some damage onto him. He does hydro, or is running his hydro potentially. I disengage myself here, and also 2 ships behind me. They are battleships, however, so if they continue firing, gonna have a problem. You can see here my hydro that I popped earlier picking up on those torpedoes. Looks like my Alabama is gonna successfully dodge most of them. Gonna put some HE fire onto that Bismarck superstructure, looking for my fire, finally get one. Switch over to the Cleveland. Now at range, my ballistics are not the easiest to work with. I also lack the penetration to actually beat the Cleveland's 25mm plate armor. But I can be annoying and set fires like so, force damage control. Can't fire on the Cleveland anymore. Gonna continue to fire openly. Lightning is the one spotting me due to my firing bloom. Looks like the Bismarck put out his fires, so again I'm gonna try and utilize that 8% fire chance. Now I could put some zoning torps into the water, which I think I will do in case anyone tries to push through that cap. Bismarck appears to have taken a torpedo. Cleveland, who is very low, is popping his radar. He dies, however. Bismarck respectfully shoots at me, so it does skim me with those 2 or 3 shells, but I do get that follow-up fire that I was looking for earlier. You can tell from his midsection, it's not burning that extensively, that he does not in fact have fire prevention, which means I'm gonna look for a second midsection superstructure fire. Briefly falling into concealment there. Slow to a stop. Bismarck is unable to fire at me. At this point the fire should be fairly lethal. And I set a follow-up fire at the last second and do burn him down. I have a substantial HP advantage over the Z-23. I'm about even with the lightning now. There's an Atago behind him, so I want to take a firing angle as I recontest BCAP where the Atago cannot interfere. Lightning only has 1 gun facing me potentially. My carrier lights him up, I think. No, it's the Alabama. So as you can see though, I ducked behind this way rather than chasing this way because of the Atago over there. I don't want to potentially get shot at. Don't have my hydro up right now, so do have to play with a bit of caution. The tubes reload fairly quickly, 91 seconds. Nothing special, but nothing unimpressive. Lightning does dispatch my Alabama, who rounded the corner, unfortunately. They're up a substantial amount of points from controlling the cap advantage for a while, even though we're up 1 ship, we are going to have to play this fairly carefully. At this point though, most of the rest of my team is in a fairly safe position, so I'm not too worried. The Z-23 is also extremely low, so if my carrier finds him, or if I find him potentially, I'm going to be able to dispatch him fairly easily. My Hipper is launching some nonsense torpedoes considering their 6-kilometer range, so I don't know what the hell is up with that. And my Cleveland also radaring for fun, even though nothing is on my radar. So in order to defend BCAP, I know both of them are on this side. I am wary of the Baltimore, so what's more threatening to me, Atago or Baltimore? Probably the Baltimore. At this point you can see my team is basically heading over to where the Atago is. So I can actually threaten him just by moving close to him. Don't want to scout from this side of this center island, so I'm going to go back through the channel on my side, the one right here, and go through in as safe a manner as possible. As I mentioned, we're still down points even though we've resecured a cap advantage. There's that Atago. It's fairly close to most of my allies. He doesn't have very many places to go. So hopefully they dispatch him quite easily. There's 2 cruisers and a battleship there, so. He has his work cut out for him if he wants to survive. He gets dispatched by my allies. I don't have RPF or anything, unfortunately, on this captain, so I do have to work a bit blind. Lexington moving up. We're gonna push north. We don't actually need that cap, so. While it would be much safer to just cap, I think it's better to just stay in the center and spot. So I would prefer if only the Amalfi goes, and then the Cleveland and Vladivostok in fact turn inward. So my Bismarck gets dispatched, probably over there. So it tells me the Z migrated over. I'm stalking the Lexington and the Baltimore, but remember, my 8-kilometer torpedoes mean that it's not going to be easy for me to catch him. Being able to torpedo the Lexington is going to put me into Baltimore radar range, which is potentially very risky. Hopefully my Lexington can dispatch that Amagi over there. He has 2 HP, more or less. He's slowing down, huh? So his carrier hull is cute to kind of stop behind this rock, I think. Baltimore does pop his radar, just gonna quickly leave the range. It's gonna prompt the Lexington to turn out and away, I reckon. So it's probably gonna miss. I'm gonna hold on to my other tube. Leave the Baltimore radar range. We're taking all 3 caps now, and we've resecured a point lead, so I'm not too concerned. Although it would be nice to farm these guys. It's not my primary goal. So as you can see, if he was going to slow down and stop, he did cease doing that action. Baltimore radar should be just about timed out, so we can reinitiate our closing on the engagement. Looks like he's just straight gunning for the cap. So what I'm going to do is wait for this Baltimore to pass this creeping point. And once he is, I am going to open up with my 360 guns. Lexington's fairly unarmored. Baltimore just fired in the other direction. Get a quick fire, which is going to get carrier damage controlled. Remember he has Havars. I'm firing openly, so no point. So against Havars, just show your bow, and you will minimize the damage. Not saying you can stop the damage entirely, but you can minimize the damage. Need to just check his location, make sure I'm angling appropriately. Firing openly against the Baltimore now. Unfortunately, I left my smoke, so I'm gonna have some problems. Can't torpedo here because they would be chase torps. Surprised the Baltimore has yet to engage me. Perhaps he's still rotating his turrets. But I'm edging out some cheeky damage onto the Lexington. Even if I die, I'm almost certainly not going to lose this match, so I can afford to be cheeky. Do you get a follow-up fire? He used his damage control recently, so I think it might stick for a couple of ticks. Oh, I'm already spotted, never mind. Never mind about keeping that AA off. Sectoring as appropriate. Again, nose in toward the torpedo, or towards the Lexington rocket planes. Havars spread nice and wide. He does catch me on the bow, however, so I'm gonna say no thank you to that fire. There's that low HP Z. That's my preferred target in terms of farming. Remember, destroyer damage accounts for more than everything else in terms of experience. Lexington launching his high explosive dive bombers. My lazy British shell arcs struggling to find damage. Oh, he's reversing. Well, that's unfortunate. Against Lexington dive bombers, you want to show your broadside, so don't nose into those. He does skim me with an in cap. Not going to bother damage controlling that, even if I had it. Want eyes on that Lexington. There he is. See him very briefly. At this point, that's a bit too much aggression. Gonna try and get that KS skill. My self-defense. Hydro does catch this. My torps are almost up. I'm inside the Baltimore's radar, but it's 997, so I'm gonna survive after getting that nice clean kill onto that Lexington to wrap up the match. Oh, sorry about that. Just doing a quick response to an important message I got just now. Anyhow, a little more ambitious second match in this pure tier 8 matchmaking. 83,000 damage this time, 190 shells expended. 83,000 damage, 190 shells expended. Again, about half of them shattered. 2 torpedo hits, 7 planes shot down. No, pretty much mediocre AA on this thing. 1 incapacitation, 3 kills, 8 fires, 1 flood, 2 solo captures, 1 assisted capture, and 1 spotting ribbon. That does tend to happen with the spotting ribbons inside of a carrier game. Base experience-wise, a nice generous 2,000 experience. If we go to the distribution, a bunch of carrier damage, but mostly battleship damage here, honestly. I did not trade that much with destroyers in this case because we tended to stay a fair distance away from each other thanks to the threat of planes and radars. You can see how the difference in spotting information being available causes you to have to play in a slightly different manner. This is particularly emphasized when there's a carrier in the match, which fundamentally does alter the way that the game should be played. This isn't to say that it renders you impotent, however. With the lightning, for example, because you have that short cooldown British smoke, basically whenever the carrier flies over you, you do technically have the option of just smoking up and going into concealment. If you really want to, it's only up to you whether you choose to use it against the carrier or not. So she ends up having that nice balanced package. Anyhow, back in the port, just to wrap this up, 2 quick games in the Lightning. She's an excellent scout cruiser, or scout destroyer, sorry. And overall one of the more balanced packages at tier 8. Good guns and decent torpedoes. Module-wise, I'm running main armaments, propulsion, aiming systems, steering gears, and concealment, very standard destroyer upgrades. Consumable-wise, get your first priority into damage control, then smoke, then hydro in that order, but really run all 3 if you can. Captain-wise, I only have 13 points, haven't been running down the British destroyers very frequently, so my captain's fairly low skill level. But I do recommend preventive maintenance into last stand, into survivability expert, into concealment expert. From here, you can do kind of whatever you want. There's a lot of build paths you can go. So unlike the Jutland and Daring, the Lightning and all the destroyers that are at her tier or below her, sorry about the messages in the background. The Lightning and all the destroyers at her tier or below, this includes of course the Cossack and also the Gallant, do not require IFHE in order to be able to pen destroyer hulls, so you can skip out on IFHE. So RPF plus BFT plus Adrenaline Rush is a very standard way to build them out. However, if you're going for a Daring Captain, then you are going to need IFHE, so that precludes 14 points, that leaves you with 5 points. So with 5 points, you can either go BFT plus Adrenaline Rush for a random battle kind of grindy or farm damage build, or if you want a slightly more competitive build for ranked or clan battles, for example, on your Daring, then you want to go with RPF plus IFHE, which leaves you with 1 spare point, which probably goes to priority target. So it's kind of up to you where you want to go. Just remember, though, that if you're taking your captain up to the Jutland and Daring, you are going to need IFHE. So your first priority for your 14 points should be preventive maintenance, last stand, survivability expert, concealment expert, and then IFHE, then back for RPF. If you're doing that, or alternately, IFHE, and then I'd say probably BFT before Adrenaline Rush caps off your build. Anyhow, just a quick lightning review. Look forward to the follow-up in her premium counterpart, the Cossack. Nice addition to my port, courtesy of Christmas doubloons and Christmas coupons and such. But that'll be all for now. Gonna be grinding towards that Utland, so that's coming in as well in the future. And I'll catch you all later. Hope you enjoy. Cheers.